Hello everyone and welcome to the sewing tutorial for this night dress. Here I'm just showing you how you should place your fabric, fold it and place your pattern to cut on a bias. So fold your fabric like this and then place your pattern on the folded edge of that fabric and cut out your front and back bodice pieces. Now on that folded edge, you're going to place your cup pattern on that folded edge with your straight grain line parallel to the folded edge. That's how you should cut your cups on a bias. Once that's done, these are all my pattern pieces all laid out. I have my front bodice and my back bodice cut on fold, and then I have my cups which I cut 4 of, 2 of which has been interfaced with a woven interfacing. Once that's done, and also my lace piece for the back also. Once that's done, we can go ahead and start sewing the cups. Now place cup A and cup B right sides together, pin along your notches at the princess seam line. Pin that and then take that to your machine and sew on 1/4 of an inch seam allowance or whatever seam allowance you've added to your pattern. Repeat the same thing for all 4 cups. And when you're done, you should have something like this. Go ahead and press your seams open on all 4 cups. And then we're going to take our strap pieces. Here I cut 4 of my strap pieces that are 1 inch wide, and then I'm going to fold it and sew 1/4 of an inch from the folded edge. Then I'm going to take my loop turner and turn it to the right side. Once that's done, you should have 4 of your strap pieces, and I'm going to take 2 of my strap pieces and place it on either side of that seam line on the facing piece. And I'm going to take my main cup and place it right sides together over the facing piece, sandwiching the straps in between those 2 pieces. And I'm going to pin along the neckline edge, take that to my machine and sew on 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Once that's done, I'm going to turn that over to the right side and make an understitch, making sure to catch all my seam allowances on the facing part of my cup. Once you're done, it should look like this. And then we're going to attach the cup to the front bodice of our dress. So taking the front bodice along the empire seam line, I'm going to take my cup piece and match facing to the dress of the garment, and I'm going to match my notches and pin along that empire seam. Make sure you're sewing the facing to the main garment, or you can join the 2 pieces and sew at once if you want a seam showing on the inside of the fabric of your dress. So take that to your machine and sew on your seam allowance and repeat the same thing for the other cup. Make sure you treat 1 cup at a time. Once you're done, it should look like this. Go ahead and press the seam allowances of your facing inwards and then clip to that V point at the center front of your dress and trim off the seam allowances. Then you're going to place the folded edge of your facing over the existing seam line from the main garment, and you're going to pin along that line, which is your empire line, making sure your facing piece is covering the existing stitching line. Once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and hand stitch that facing to the main bodice. I'm going to be doing a slip stitch, but if you want, you can do a stitch in the ditch, but it's a silk fabric and I don't want any stitching line showing in the front of my garment, so I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch the facing to the main bodice. Here I'm just showing you how I slip stitch. So I'm taking my needle and I'm going to pick the already existing line from the main garment and pick one yarn of the facing fabric like this, and then I'm going to pull my thread into my needle into the folded edge of that facing, and then repeat the process. Pick one thread and one yarn of the facing fabric and then pull my needle into the folded edge. Do that all the way around and it should look like this when you're done. So this is the front of the dress. Now we're going to set that aside and work on the neckline of our back dress. So to finish the neckline of the back dress, I'm just using a bias tape made from the same fabric. So I'm going to pin one edge of the bias tape along the neckline of the back dress, and I'm going to take that to the machine and sew at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once that's done, I'm going to trim that 1/4 inch to 1/8 inch seam allowance. And then I'm going to fold my bias tape over the existing stitching line, pin that down, take that to my machine and sew close to the edge of that. Once that's done, it should look like this. Go ahead and press your seams, and then I'm going to place my lace piece over my back fabric right sides facing each other, and I'm going to sew on my 5/8 inch seam allowance. Now if it helps, mark out your seam allowance on the wrong side of your fabric so you know what you're doing. And then I'm going to clip to that V point, and then I'm going to turn the other side of my lace and place it right sides together over my back piece, pin along the seam allowance and take that to my machine and sew it. Also, I want to mention that if you're working with a silk fabric, please make sure your iron is on low heat, because too much heat is going to damage the look of the fabric. So make sure your iron is on low heat if you need to press it. Once that's done, I'm going to go ahead and give it a good press, and then I'm going to trim my seam allowances to 3/8 inch on both sides, and then take that to my machine and do a zigzag stitch along that edge to finish the seam allowance. If you have a serger, you can also use a serger, but I don't have one. Once that's done, we're going to now join the front bodice piece to the back piece. So I'm going to place my front over my back, wrong sides together, because I'm going to use a French seam to finish the raw edges of my side seam. If you're working with delicate fabric, French seams are just the right seam finishing to use. So I'm going to place my fabric wrong sides together and sew on a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then I'm going to trim that seam allowance down to 1/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to turn my fabric over, making sure the right sides are together, and I'm going to pin along the side seam, take that to my machine and sew on a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Now this seam allowance measurement is for a 5/8 of an inch. If you're using more than a 5/8 of an inch or less than a 5/8 of an inch, work according to the seam allowance you've created on your pattern. So I'm going to do that on both sides of my side seam, and the pattern, your dress is almost complete. What's left to do is to pin your straps on your back piece. Go ahead and wear your dress. See how you want the straps to fit tightly on you. Pin that down. You might need someone to help you with that. Pin that down, take that to your machine and sew that down along the back neckline. Once you're done, all that's left to do is to hem the hem of your dress. Now I suggest you hang this dress overnight so that the pattern will drape and fall and you can tell where the true hem of the dress is. If you need to trim off any side that is longer than the other, please do so. So here I have my garment. The next day it has been hung and I've trimmed off some of the parts. So to hem it, I'm doing a narrow hem. What I did was fold my pattern over and stitched close to the folded edge, and then I'm going ahead to trim off the excess all around that hem. And when I'm done trimming it, I'm going to fold it over again and use the existing line as a guide to stitch on for a second time. And when you're done, it should look like this, and your dress is complete. Here is what it looks like when it's done. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you like this dress, please subscribe to my channel and leave me a thumbs up. Turn on your notification bell so you get notified every time I post a new video. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you in the next one.